I feel like someone who I've always taken a liking to and who has such great star power in WWE today is big man Bronson Reed. This man in NXT was always a joy to watch for me, and he's also a former NXT North American champion as well. But as you all know, during the WWE talent famine of 2020 and 2021, Bronson Reed would become victim to these releases. And with Bronson basically on his way back to WWE at any moment after an injury at War Games, you guys already saw it, so you know what I'm talking about. I wanted to kind of look into what he was doing during that time when he was, away from WWE for a little under a year. And if you didn't know, he was doing a lot of stuff in TNA. Bronson Reed was now known as Jonah. He would also make his name more known in New Japan, but there was a small stint of 6 months that Jonah actually competed in TNA back in 2022. I saw some of the matches he had on Impact on paper and decided it would be a great topic to look into. So let's get started and find out what the hell Jonah ended up doing in TNA, and if he actually did anything worth noting while affiliated with TNA. Jonah would make his debut on Impact at Turning Point 2021, where he would sneak attack Josh Alexander from behind and would give him some elbows and multiple sentons. Jonah delivers the 4th senton and then just jumps off the top rope with the tsunami. Jonah would double clothesline some security dicks and dispose of other future stars as Josh is bleeding at the mouth, and Jonah just pokes at Josh's head and smiles with a sadistic attention as he leaves the ring. Bronson decides he's not finished with Josh and he climbs up to the top and delivers a 2nd tsunami and then rubs Alexander's blood all over his shirt. Jonah leaves Alexander in a bloody pulp as the medics tend to him. Alright, well at least we're actually getting a cool start. Flash about 12 days later to Impact, and Scott D'Amore is stressed out about the Knockouts Ultimate X match as Jai Vidal isn't being put in the Knockouts match. Jai Vidal is looking cute, his words, not mine.
I got my gear on, I'm looking cute.
And he's ready to compete. Scott D'Amore only has one opportunity, but it's up against Jonah. And it's up next. Vidal has already pissed his pants. Jonah immediately catches Vidal, Jai lands on his feet and clubs Jonah in the back. Jonah says, "Oh, what the fuck?" and then just pushes Vidal out of the sky. Jonah hits the big boy block and then drops Vidal with a delayed vertical suplex toss. Jonah with the running senton and then scales the top rope for the tsunami and then squashes Vidal for the win. Jonah grabs a microphone and puts himself over as the top dog. He confronted Moose in New Japan and he wants the world championship, but before he gets to that, let's talk about Josh Alexander. He says that people saying Josh is the best wrestler in the world, and they say to be the best, you gotta go through the top dog. I can say that at least Jonah does look like a dominating challenge so far in only the 2 appearances that he's made. 2 weeks later, Jonah delivers a pre-tape explaining what is the top dog. Jonah tells a story about his dad in prison and how he got hit in the back of the head. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, I just tried to read this line and I still had no idea what the hell Jonah was talking about, which explains what he did to Josh Alexander at Turning Point. Jonah says instead of earning the respect, he's gonna beat the respect into him, as he says, "You're the walking weapon, well I'm the weapon of mass destruction." Which is a pretty badass line as well. He's got some good one-liners so far. 3 weeks later, Jonah is back in in-ring action and he goes up against Jake Something. Collar and elbow tie-up to start us off with his big-ass beef fight. Something runs into Jonah, Jonah tells him to do it again to no avail. Something tells Jonah to do it, but Jonah instead rocks him. Jake then hits a flying shoulder tackle on Jonah to commercial break. Jonah and Jake club each other for a little. Jake lands on his feet out of a back suplex, which allows a shoulder tackle into the corner. Jake keeps up the momentum and pounces Jonah to the outside. Jake Something then takes flight and clears out Jonah. Jonah fights off a suplex attempt with a back elbow. Jake answers with his own, and then Reed lines him up for a lariat and then hits the running senton. Jonah then scales the top rope and hits the tsunami and it's over. Honestly wanted this match to go on a little bit longer, but this was a alright little TV match. Josh Alexander comes down to the ring and they start going at it. Josh tries for an ankle lock, but the security is able to pull the men apart. Josh believes he can fly and they try to continue the brawl as Jonah splashes a bunch of dudes and Alexander. Jonah then body slams Josh and then gives him a senton. Jonah then goes to the outside and grabs a table from under the ring. Jonah starts driving the table into the ribs of Josh in the corner. When Jonah sets up the table, he places Josh on it and then completely obliterates Alexander through the table with the tsunami. We get to Jonah's first pay-per-view match and it's up against the walking weapon, Josh Alexander. Josh gets a Yakuza kick on Jonah, but Jonah then throws a clothesline. The match is on as Josh starts stomping on Jonah in the corner. Josh with the missile dropkick doesn't knock Jonah down, but he then goes for the senton and misses. Josh attempts the ankle lock, but Jonah just kicks him through the ropes. Josh avoids a shot from Jonah and then boots him into the ring as his leg is caught up in the ropes. Jonah takes a seat on the apron, but then Josh hits a rear crossbody through the bottom rope. On the outside, Jonah avoids a suplex attempt and then gives him like a fisherman gutbuster, but instead he drops him ribs first onto the apron, and that was an ugly ass landing. Josh is laid out on the top rope. Jonah somehow just pops him into like a tossing hyperdrive, but it's only a 2 count. Jonah gives Josh a stiff elbow to the face and then locks in the torture rack. Josh fights out of it and elbows Jonah to the mouth. Josh tries chopping Jonah some more. Jonah gives some more stiff elbows, and then Josh starts pushing Jonah's face, and then Josh goes down with a bigger elbow. Josh gets some momentum and clotheslines Jonah to the floor. Josh lifts up Jonah on the outside, and he lands into the crowd. Josh and Jonah start punching each other amongst the fans, where Jonah then clotheslines him over the barricade. Josh reciprocates with a big elbow. Josh then decides to be a fucking daredevil and jumps from the top rope, clears the barricade, and lands right on Jonah. That was fucking impressive. Why the fuck did he go to AEW? Back in the ring, Josh sets up for the spike, but he gets a back body drop. Jonah eats a boot and then a diving knee drop to the back of the head, but it only snags the 2. Josh and Jonah with the strike exchange minigames. Jonah and Josh exchange slaps, and good lord, this match is just 2 beefy dudes slapping meat, and it's great. Jonah drops Josh with the powerbomb, stacks him up for a 2, clears him with a big lariat, and then gets another 2. Jonah hits some headbutts and then drops Josh with the brainbuster, but Alexander ain't giving up yet, and we can see Josh has been opened up by the headbutts. Jonah looks to sail the seas, but Josh springs up to his feet and locks in an ankle lock with Jonah still on the top rope. Jonah knocks Josh down and then hits a huge moonsault. Good lord, look at that fat man fly. Josh with the elbow, the Saito suplex, and a deadlift powerbomb, but Jonah is still in it. Josh stomps on Jonah's face some more, and then he relocks in the ankle lock, and then Jonah has to tap out. Possibly the best match in the video for sure, but also the best Bronson Reed / Jonah match I've ever seen. These two were working such a stiff match, and it really showed how deep the feud had gotten. Hats off for these two for a really great match. We head over to the next episode of Impact, where Raj Singh says, "Suck your mom and listen to me." He says he is a Punjabi warrior. No, you're not Great Khali. And calls the fans. This is 2022, by the way. Singh says he wants some competition and doesn't care who it is, and then in comes our top dog, Jonah. Raj hits Jonah with an elbow, and then a big overhead punch, and then a running punch, and then Jonah tells him to go again, and then lays him out with a clothesline. Raj gets the legs up in the corner and rolls out of it, and then throws an elbow, and attempts at an Irish whip, but Bronson then gives him the hyperdrive, followed by the pancake senton, and then the tsunami for the 1-2-3. 2 weeks later, we see Johnny Swinger, saying some nonsense to Jonah, where he then just tosses him into a wall, and then leaves him to the vultures of decay. Jonah's opponent for the night is also Johnny Dickhead. The bell rings and Johnny goes for his leg, which Jonah then hits the Triple H facebuster. Swinger rakes the eyes, but then this gives him the hyperdrive, followed by the running senton. And then how about seconds before Jonah climbs the top rope and hits the tsunami for another dominating win to leave Dan Lambert impressed. Jonah grabs Swinger and then tosses him out of the ring, where we then see Decay's graphics and music start playing. Rosemary, Crazy Steve, and Black Taurus surround Swinger as Jonah stares down with Black Taurus and leaves the match unscathed. Next week on Impact, Jonah goes one-on-one with 1/3 of Decay, Crazy Steve. Jonah immediately gets distracted by Rosemary yelling, but he then just easily shoves Crazy Steve off of him. Steve does a mirror spot in the Hangman's taunt, and then starts the shots on Jonah in the corner. Steve mounts on the front of Jonah and gets a bite out of his head. Jonah stops the running spot with an easy push, and then splashes Steve in the corner before he stares down Rosemary at ringside. Jonah with the hyperdrive / senton combo, and then after some slight waiting, he puts the match away with the tsunami. Jonah wants to hit another tsunami, but Decay gets in front of him before he can jump. Jonah jaw jacks with Taurus before he escapes again. Jonah's back on pay-per-view, and this time he takes on another 1/3 of Decay, and sadly it's not Rosemary. That would be a really interesting match, but Jonah takes on Black Taurus. A big beefy stare down starts off this match, and yes, it is a bullfight. No, I will not continue the bull jokes.
Bullshit. Mind it.
Taurus moonsaults out of a wrist lock and gives Jonah some chops. Taurus tries to knock Jonah over, but Taurus decides to give him a gut kick, and then after a running sequence, Jonah just knocks Taurus down midair. Jonah clotheslines Taurus to the outside, which leads to Jonah being pushed face first into the corner post, and then Taurus flies with the suicide dive. After a few moments, Taurus flies again with a corkscrew crossbody, but merely whiffs Jonah on the landing. Taurus gets caught with a military press and then gets drop ribs first into the turnbuckle. Jonah then follows up with a hyperdrive. Good lord, that bull had wings for a second. Give that boy some Red Bull. Taurus boots Jonah out of the corner and then hits the shotgun dropkick, followed by the reverse sling blade, and then a crucifix bomb, but Jonah pushes him off at the 2. Taurus with the uppercut and Zagiri combo, he eats a splash from Jonah and then headbutts him, and then the top dog then knocks down the bull with the beefy boy shoulder block. Jonah goes face first into the middle turnbuckle, Taurus hits a feint kick, and then hits a corkscrew senton on Jonah for the 2 count. Taurus has Jonah on the top rope, where Jonah maneuvers Taurus and then press slams him off the top, followed by the beefy boy block from the second rope, and then Jonah looks to put it away with the powerbomb, but Taurus is still kicking. Jonah with the wind-up lariat, followed by the tsunami, is able to secure the victory for our Thicc boy. We head over to the next episode of Impact, and Jonah goes toe-to-toe with Zicky Dice. Zicky immediately strikes at Jonah, lands on his feet after a back suplex, and chop blocks Jonah. Jonah stops Zicky with the beefy block and then drops him with a brainbuster, and then the big running senton. Jonah wastes no time and then drops Dice with a sit-out powerbomb for the win. Jonah looks for a post-match tsunami on Dice, and he nails it. I was actually about to mention how we didn't even see the tsunami in the match, but I guess he made up for it. Next week on Impact, Johnny Shithead gets a rematch against Jonah. Why?
I don't know.
Johnny Swinger's a dumbass. Johnny starts hulking up immediately and rakes the eyes of Jonah twice, and then looks for a Russian leg sweep. Jonah says, "Yo, you dead ass," and then drops Johnny with a body slam, followed by the running senton. Big man flies through the air and then gets rid of the Swinger in less than a minute. Again. Jonah looks for the post-match tsunami, where then PCO's music hits, and then the Inhuman Freak barks his way down to the ring. Jonah headbutts PCO and then body slams him, where he then hits the tsunami on PCO. Well, that was ineffective. PCO gets reanimated from the dead and then clotheslines Jonah to the outside. We head over to Sacrifice 2022, and we have the top dog taking on the one who isn't human. Jonah and PCO hammer at each other to start us off, as Jonah then eats the turnbuckle and then some body shots from the French Canadian, followed by a running neckbreaker. PCO and Jonah start fighting on the outside, and then Jonah fires away with a big elbow, where then he gives a Russian leg sweep onto the ramp. Jonah chops at PCO for a little, but PCO just keeps inviting more pain from the top dog, and then PCO starts firing back with some chops of his own in the corner, machine gun style. Jonah gets lined over the top rope, and then PCO hits the cannonball senton through the middle rope. Jonah gets set up on the apron for PCO's senton spot, where he degloves, and then takes a chance and dives onto Jonah. Jonah slows PCO down on the top rope and hits a supersized superplex for the double down from KFC. PCO eats a chop, and then Jonah eats a discus elbow. PCO then delivers a fucked up German on Jonah, who then pops up and gives PCO a German of his own. PCO says fuck that shit, and then they both keep throwing clotheslines at each other until PCO goes down. PCO ducks a line, where then Jonah recovers into a DDT. PCO is still alive, and then Jonah hits a big suplex to try and kill the Frankenstein. PCO does his undead rising pose and then eats a super kick. Jonah looks for the tsunami, but the fucked up camera transitions allow PCO to hit a top row Hurricane Rana. Rewatching it, PCO nearly snapped his neck on this fucking landing. Also, sorry for this footage, this is literally the episode of TNA on TNA Plus, so I don't even know what happened here. PCO climbs the top ropes and hits the PCO salt, but Jonah kicks out at 2. PCO looks for the end, but Jonah runs to the outside, and then PCO goes head first into the stairs. Jonah gets rid of the top stair and then gives PCO a tombstone pile driver on the bottom stairpiece. That was a crazy fucking spot. Jonah sees PCO isn't dead yet, and then he gives PCO a jackknife off the stairs, and then to seal the deal, Jonah hits the tsunami. Not as good as the Taurus or Alexander match, but definitely a solid pay-per-view showing from Jonah. PCO, also crazy as shit, as always. And also, why do I feel like the powerbomb hurt worse than the pile driver? 2 weeks later, we get another rematch. This time, Zicky Dice looks at a chance for redemption against Jonah. Zicky Dice has shit in his drawers and then tries to nope out of there, but then Jonah grabs him by the hair and then gives him a rear lariat, followed by the tsunami for the win. He then disposes of Dice just as quickly to the floor. Jonah gets distracted as we then see PCO come out on a stretcher. Who the hell hit his music cue as he revives from the dead and stumbles towards the ring? PCO disposes of the neck brace, and the behemoths start firing away on each other before a bunch of security guys and referees try to hold these big men back as Jonah goes to the outside to retreat. PCO climbs the top rope and dominoes everyone on the outside besides Jonah, who escapes towards the stage. 2 weeks later, PCO is yelling for Jonah in a parking lot, where we get super cinematic all of a sudden for this backstage brawl. Jonah hits PCO with a hand truck before putting PCO on it and tossing him into some traffic cones. Jonah headbutts PCO and then power bombs him into the fucking concrete. Jonah is beating PCO's face in and grabs a sledgehammer, driving it into PCO's chest cavity. Jonah then puts a slab of concrete on PCO's chest and then breaks it with the hammer. PCO is still alive and then goozles Jonah. Jonah eats shit on an electric box, and then PCO starts slamming Jonah's head in a car door and does some PCO noises. PCO finds some random soil and starts shoveling it onto Jonah, where he then looks like that thing from Morgan Here's a Who, and then it cuts to black. We back on pay-per-view at Multiverse of Matches, and we get a big-time tag team match where PCO and Impact World Champion Moose take on Jonah and his first Impact rival, Josh Alexander, as his partner. PCO attacks Josh Alexander as him and Jonah argue about who starts the match. PCO and Josh Alexander start this one off. Jonah tags himself into the match eventually, and they start arguing as PCO gets up and screams, but then they both start stomping his ass out in the corner. PCO and Jonah exchange clotheslines, but then Moose just tags himself in very slowly. Moose gets staggered off of a shoulder tackle and then eats another, but follows up with a kip up and a flip off. Moose starts taking all 4 ropes and then just keeps running into Jonah to try and knock him over, and he does this for like a good 30 seconds before getting laid out with another shoulder tackle from Jonah. Jonah with the huge heel throw on the champ right before Josh Alexander tagged himself in. Moose and PCO get their heel heat on Alexander to pass the time, and Jonah finally gets involved a few minutes later when he's knocked off the apron by PCO. Jonah gets the tag and turns Moose inside out with a big clothesline, followed by a corner splash and a Samoan drop. Jonah attempts the senton but misses and then tags Alexander back in. PCO sends Jonah to the floor, and then there goes Josh, and then here comes PCO with the cannonball senton on the outside. PCO sets up Josh with the de-animator, and this time he lands it, but PCO definitely smacked his noggin and or neck off the apron. Jonah super kicks PCO in the face, and then Moose knocks down Jonah, followed by Alexander and Moose knocking each other down, and now all 4 men are down. Jonah saves Josh Alexander from a PCO attack with a big spear, followed by the C4 spike on the PCO, which allows Josh to get the win for himself and Jonah. After the match, Josh looks for a fist bump, but Jonah just smacks it away and goes back to the impact zone. Honor No More is brawling with the Bullet Club as PCO hits the de-animator on everyone, and we hear Jonah's music hit. Jonah gets his one-on-one rematch with PCO right now. Jonah starts off with the splash into the corner, but then PCO canes Jonah right in the face. PCO climbs the top rope and hits an old school elbow. Jonah tosses PCO down to the floor, where PCO then pulls him to the floor as well, and they both start chopping at each other. Jonah tries to splash PCO against the post, but he's an idiot and then eats a neck breaker. PCO reaches under the announce table and starts duct taping his neck. Definitely some Far Cry logic here. Break your neck, take it up. Or be Jonah and then toss PCO into the barricade and hit a running strike off the apron. Jonah sets up for a powerbomb and then drops him into the turnbuckle, where PCO then screams and then throws a clothesline to knock them both down. Jonah and PCO hammer away with the forearm exchanges, where then Jonah catches PCO and then manhandles him into the tombstone piledriver, but PCO kicks out at 1. Holy shit, I can see why people don't agree with PCO's gimmick. PCO goes to each turnbuckle and starts delivering flying headbutts, and he hits the top rope headbutt, but Jonah is still alive. PCO signals for the PCO salt, but there's no water in the pool. PCO climbs back up to the top and then misses the de-animator this time. Jonah then drops him with a back suplex onto the barricade, climbs the top, and drops PCO with the tsunami for the second win. After the match, PCO springs back from the dead and Jonah starts caving in his skull to put him down. Jonah goes under the ring and grabs a chair as he whacks PCO in the back and belly with it. Jonah then sets the chair on PCO's chest and gives him a tsunami. Jonah then watches in joy as PCO lies lifeless and he exits the ring. Last pay-per-view match of the video, and Jonah gets himself a dream match as he's set to face the Stone Pitbull Tomohiro Ishii here at Rebellion. I know this match is going to be stiff as fuck, so I'm ready for this Beef vs Wagyu fight. Ishii and Jonah lock up at the horns and start laying in the forearms on one another. They then upgrade the exchange to a chop battle, and then Ishii starts trying what Moose did a few matches ago, but again it gets thwarted by a shoulder tackle. Ishii ducks some shots, but he then gets hit with a 300-pound sack of meat. This match is a little slow at this point as Jonah works a chin lock, which makes me uncomfortable, I don't know why. Jonah elbows Ishii's bald ass head and then hits him right in the ear, but then Ishii starts hulking up and or having a malfunction, and then Ishii starts eating some more elbows. Ishii elbows Jonah and looks for the German, but he gets back squashed into the corner. Ishii gets a kick to the gut and looks for the brainbuster, but Jonah drops him with a body slam. Ishii takes advantage of Jonah's mistake and then hits a basement elbow. The heavy hitters take turns in the corner with their offense, and then Jonah hits a corner splash and exploder suplex. Ishii fights out of the fireman's carry with some elbows and then eats a Yakuza kick, but then Ishii chops Jonah's trunks down and he looks for the brainbuster. He then gets caught with the hyperdrive and senton for the 2 count. Jonah goes for the Jonah bomb, but Ishii fights him off and then catches Jonah with a German suplex off the rebound. Ishii with a big clothesline and then another one, but the third gets caught and then Ishii gets a big lariat. Ishii waddles back up and then takes Jonah off his feet with a lariat, but then Jonah kicks out. Jonah eats an enziguri, he catches Ishii's basement lariat. Jonah topples Ishii over and then shoots some elbows, headbutts Ishii, and then causes him to fall. Jonah takes advantage with the Jonah bomb, but Ishii kicks out at 2. Jonah pulls Ishii up for a lariat, but that's also a kick out. Jonah looks for a brainbuster, but gets a headbutt. He then spears Ishii out of his shoes. Jonah tries to take advantage with the tsunami, but Ishii moves and hits the basement lariat, but Jonah's still in this bitch. Ishii with some headbutts, and then he powers Jonah in the air and drops him with a brainbuster for the 3 count. Solid pay-per-view match, definitely love strong style wrestling, and these guys told a great story in the ring. Good lord, it's always great just seeing 2 guys beat the living fuck out of each other. It is now time for the last match of this video, and hopefully we end on a good note as we have Jonah taking on PCO, but this time it's the Monsters Ball, so let's hope for some crazy shit in this one. We head backstage where a dork knocks on Jonah's door and then the referee knocks on PCO's storage closet, but goddamn, Jonah steamrolls PCO and starts choking him with a chain. Match can go anywhere in the arena, by the way, and in kayfabe they have been without food, water, or light for 24 hours, which I think is kind of a dope idea for this match. PCO and Jonah start fighting in a random staircase, and this leads right to outside the stage and they start punching the shit out of each other. PCO disrobes and chases after Jonah. He goozles him and looks for a chokeslam on Jonah off the stage, but he just gets steamrolled again. The gentlemen take the fight towards the ringside, but not before Jonah gives PCO a suplex onto the diamond ramp. We come back from commercial and they are chair sword fighting, and now the ring is filled with chairs, dinner trays, trash cans, and a ladder. Jonah bell claps PCO with 2 lunch trays and then sets up a couple chairs in the twisted mechanism. Jonah cracks PCO on the head with a trash lid, and then PCO recovers as Jonah is situated on the top rope. PCO then hits a top rope hurricane rana through the pile of chairs. Jonah sets up a single chair this time and he sits PCO down into it and then just barrel rolls through him while he's set down. Jonah sets up a ladder in the corner. He then gives PCO a back suplex, but good lord, he over-rotated and goes through the ladder. Jonah then goes on the outside and sets up a table and then grabs another trash can lid. PCO follows Jonah on the apron and they start the yay boo shot exchange. Back in the ring, PCO gives Jonah a corner clothesline into a DDT onto the trash can, and then he hits his signature cannonball. PCO sets for the deanimator, and he nails it and lands on his feet. That's actually a very rare PCO moment. PCO wedges a chair in the corner and then immediately drives Jonah headfirst into it. PCO looks to set up a Home Depot contraption with the chairs now. PCO runs out of the corner for the bulldog but gets tossed spine first on top of the chairs. Out of character. How the fuck is this man still alive off the 2 count and in life in general? Jonah goes under the ring and has a familiar bag and dumps out some thumbtacks. Jonah sets PCO up and drops him with a powerbomb onto the tacks. Somehow PCO kicks out at 2. Jonah goes up to the top, but PCO hits him in the face, then attempts a running sledgehammer attack. Jonah looks for a suplex to the floor, but PCO recovers and hits him with the sledgehammer, and then Jonah goes crashing down through the table. PCO climbs up to the top and hits his PCO salt, and finally defeats Jonah to win Monsters Ball. And that was the last time that we ever saw Jonah in TNA.